All right, thank you. Good afternoon. One of the things that I wanted to bring forward is that when we start considering supporting STEM in the rural context, it's really critical to make sure that we understand there may be differences in how rural and even STEM is conceptualized and defined by the people in the room and the very community you're working in. This can make a difference to everyone at the planning table, your potential funders, students, parents, and the community, and that would also influence their support of your program. If this is not clearly defined and communicated, the planning team may find that they don't qualify for funding if you're applying for some additional funding, may not have the parent and community support, and there may be even differences in the strategies the team members feel are appropriate for the program. Cora, I still don't have control. I'm sorry. There. So let's begin right now. Over in the chat pod, would you write your definition of rural? Let's think about that. How would you define rural? Does everyone know? Oh. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, this is very interesting. Oh, I like that one. 10 kids per square mile. That is very, very interesting. I haven't heard that one, but I like it. Whenever we start thinking about definitions, there are 4 distinct federal definitions of rural. And so if we start with the Census Bureau, they go with the not urban or an urban cluster. And they follow county lines. And whenever they start following county lines that way, sometimes you end up with suburbs that are classified as rural. Whereas if you go to the other side, another version, the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, they look at county lines, but they also add in commuting patterns. And so when you start putting in the commuting patterns, you end up with the Grand Canyon that's counted as a metro county, which is quite interesting. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Research Services looks at counties as well, and they say not associated with large labor market areas. And the National Center for Education Statistics also looks at the distance from an urban area or an urban cluster. You notice all 4 of them start with urban and urban cluster and say it is not one of those, which is very interesting. So whenever you started thinking about your definitions that are showing up here in the chat pod, you may have had that, or perhaps it was closer to Merriam-Webster's definition, which relates to country, country people, country life, agriculture, farming. But I would caution, you've got all of the definitions, the federal definitions, and even within your groups, there's going to be differences within the same school. Some school teachers, administrators are going to feel that they are rural, and some will not. And so you need to really, when you start talking about planning support, thinking about what is rural, and does everyone at the table agree, and does your potential funding source qualify you as a rural area. So after you've developed your operational definition, another thing that I would challenge you to do that's going to help your planning of the support is to clarify what is STEM and what does it look like. If we look at the science and math discipline, they define STEM as an approach to teaching and learning science concepts. NSF, the National Science Foundation, defines it as a very transformative approach to traditional teaching and learning that fosters creativity and innovative thinking in all students. And also the science and math disciplines think of technology as a product of science, whereas if you go to the technology and engineering folks, they view technology as very independent of science. Their discipline emphasizes the generation of knowledge to produce change that benefits mankind through the application of the knowledge. So you've got different approaches. The technology and engineering may use STEM as a capstone project, very end, whereas science and math, it's an approach all the way throughout. So if you don't have an agreement on what is STEM, you might be at cross purposes. Then we start looking at some of the new acronyms, maybe some of them not so new. STEAM. STEAM being the addition of the arts. And some would argue, what do the arts have to do with it? But if you start thinking about it, the arts are very important. Particularly, look at the iPhones and the iPads. There's an artistic design built in there. So that would be a nice addition. Another addition would be STREAM, the addition of the reading into it. So that's very important. STEM-C, where we get into coding. Coding has become very, very important as far as STEM. And then the technology and engineering have felt that science and math has gotten too much of an emphasis, so they bring up the T and E as far as to bring that to a complete emphasis. And we've got E-STEM, which would bring in environmental sciences to focus and bring attention to that. And I would, so you've got a lot of different emphasis and approaches, and Albert Ports would argue then that this is leading to a STEM identity crisis. So your planning team really needs to clearly identify and clarify and communicate what is STEM. What does it look like in your program that you propose to bring? Otherwise, you might end up being at cross purposes within your own team. So when we start thinking about that, you've got STEM defined in the rural environment. So let's think about, why should STEM be an option in rural areas? We don't think of too much technology out there. But then the Committee on Education and the Workforce argues that if STEM is put into place well, then you're going to have it good for, the benefits will be good for the community and students, what they call reciprocal benefits, which is really where we want to go. It should benefit for those. So let's pause a minute. What would be some rural STEM careers that have a reciprocal benefit for the students and for their community? Could you put in some examples in your in the chat pod? Can you think of some? Engineering, ag sciences. Yes, the agricultural sciences, definitely. We start thinking about pest-resistant crops, the use of fertilizers. STEAM is very viable as far as farming, food processing, advanced manufacturing, seed sales, okay, the development of viable seeds, and even the agricultural research. So we're getting some really good examples of some careers that would be very viable in the rural community. Health sciences, most definitely the health sciences have shown up quite often in many of the rural communities I've worked with. So you're getting the idea. It's not a desert of STEM careers when we start talking about rural. And we really need to capitalize on rural assets. The National Association of State School Boards really says that you need to leverage on what is there and capitalize on them. Oh, winemaking with a smile, yes, definitely. But one of the things that we need to make sure is that when we start developing and supporting STEM programs, that it benefits both. We need to be sensitive to the rural community and that culture and environment out there. And so when we start expanding it beyond the school, we need to think about the ecosystem, a rural STEM ecosystem. Trappenhagen and Trail describe them as diverse, interconnected individuals in an adaptive relationship that evolves over time to support STEM learning from early childhood through adulthood. And those individuals can be family, the local economic base, government, regional government, local, federal, and each of them can work in their own way to support that STEM learning ecosystem. So strategic partnerships are very, very critical. It goes beyond the school. The school does really great stuff. They provide the courses, the counseling, the tutoring, online support, business and community. They can bring in internships. They can bring mentors. They can actually provide feedback on some of those problem-based projects that the students are working on. And they can start leading into very skilled STEM careers. And so you need to really, when you start thinking about supporting a rural STEM ecosystem, who are the champions? Who would be a good champion to help move this forward? So those are some considerations whenever you start developing these, your STEM program in a rural area. And right now I'm going to pass it off to David Burns, who's with Battelle, and he's going to give you some good practical experiences that he has worked on. David?